Hello. Um, I wanted to share just a few thoughts and it started with a quote I read from Caroline Myss a couple of days ago. And the quote wasn't really a quote, it was a post that she wrote about the women in Iran. And what she said was, these women are asking for spiritual support, the support of your interior power, your power of focusing your light, your mystical power, the mystical power of women not to forget about them, to focus that power, your light. Women need an incredible network of light around the world to inspire us everywhere, whether it is in Iran or Ukraine or even in the United States, where power is being repressed. That's just a short extract from what she wrote. And when I read this, it really touched something in me, because what it brought to mind was how typically, we tend to dissociate from the news. You know, we read these terrible reports of things happening around the world and we just cut off from it energetically or however else, because it just feels like there's nothing that we can do. Um, and specifically, it reminded me of when I worked in insurance law. One of the things that I had to do was read um, just the insurance industry media every day. One part of my job was compiling um, notes of kind of what was happening in the insurance industry around the world, and that included different large events that were had caused large losses, insurance losses, and that kind of thing. So insurance industry news typically is going to involve the worst catastrophes around the world, like terrible weather events and natural disasters and plane crashes and financial crashes and those kind of things that all lead to large economic losses. But these events also most often lead to losses of lives and certainly to a lot of suffering. Um, yeah, they're often like major catastrophes, obviously, things like, Hurricane Katrina or 9/11 or just these massive, massive events, the recent hurricanes in Florida, etc. So, yeah, I think what I noticed over time was reading this. I didn't enjoy it. I found it difficult, but I wasn't really able to feel anything, or I noticed that I didn't really feel anything. I think that's what I found most unsettling. I was reading these news reports and wasn't feeling anything. And of course, that is in a way the correct way. You work in a law firm, or you work in, maybe if you work in the insurance industry or whatever, and you have to read this stuff, it's correct that you shouldn't really feel anything. It's kind of bothersome to feel things. It's not going to lead to increased productivity, really, if you pause, um, and allow this stuff into your heart in some way, or allow yourself to feel what you're reading. So it was correct that I wasn't feeling anything in a way. That was kind of a good thing. But I found it very troubling because I could sense that it was affecting me, but my body wasn't being given the space or time to take in the information. And of course, when you read information about a plane crash or about a hurricane or about just some disaster that's happened in the news, images come into your mind and you see words, and you know that people are suffering and other beings are suffering and communities are suffering, and it's not possible to deny that. The images are there. We know this. We know that this is happening. So the most organic and natural reaction to that is for your heart to open to your fellow beings and connect with their suffering and feel it with them in some way and process that. I mean, that's the most natural thing that you would do in that situation. It's unnatural to cut yourself off from that it doesn't feel good, it doesn't feel right. Um, and we know this, even though in a way we're being told that it's correct not to feel anything. In a way, that's the implicit or indirect message that we get in our jobs or in this productive society, that no, there's no space. I mean, that it would seem ridiculous to say to somebody, "Oh, I'm sorry now," you're in the middle of a busy law office and you say, "Well, look, I've just read this piece here about the terrible hurricane, and I'm going to take a moment. I'm going to take 15 minutes or half an hour and go into a quiet space and process it, and feel." People would just think you're cracked, or but that's actually, in a way, that is a natural thing to do, to let that stuff move through us. So in any event, yeah, I mean, I suppose it just, when I read the Caroline Myss post, it reminded me of this. And what she is asking in her post is for us to do the opposite of what I've just said. So to do the most natural thing, we hear about the women in Iran and what they're experiencing and going through, and she's asking, don't disconnect from this, don't just read about it and your mind will say, oh, that's terrible, and just move on to the next. She's saying, no, open your heart and feel into what they are experiencing, and particularly as a woman, feel into your spiritual heart and feel what's going on there, let it go in. And she says, your spiritual support, the support of your interior power, the power of our hearts to connect with others, and um, also to transmute in a mysterious way that suffering. Of course, it can be overwhelming to let that in, and it's not that we're being asked to let everything in because it's too much, but um, we can we can actually help in a mysterious way. And I can't say that I know how it works at all. I'm not sure many people do. But I do believe that we can actually help transmute some of that suffering by allowing our hearts to open to feel it, um, and join with others, even though we're not in the same location and maybe we're not able to offer more practical support of money or whatever it is. But we can actually offer that support of feeling alongside them with our heart and feeling into our own light, and raising ourselves and others up through that light, and choosing not to dissociate from it, choosing not to kind of cut ourselves off and just stay in the head and not connect deeply into our hearts. Yeah, and there's one other thing that then this brought to mind for me, and that was an article that I read or was referenced at a conference I was at some years ago, and I can try and reference it below, but it was an article called Legal Education's Concern with Justice. So it just called to mind, it was basically um, a lawyer and another person describing their reactions to an event that had a very traumatic, tragic event that had caused a large loss of life. And I thought the article was brilliant because, of course, the legal reaction was purely mind based and purely black and white legal analysis. And when the other person provided their reaction, this is what they said. You asked for my reaction to the event. I do not find it easy to sort out my reactions, let alone to say them out loud. I think it's important to make the attempt. My first reaction is to cry. Over 2,000 people suddenly killed in their beds, perhaps 250,000 in pain, etc., etc. It was obviously, I think it was based on a real event in India in the 80s. And then they go on to say, my second reaction is to pray. My third reaction is to scream. My fourth reaction is to want to do something. And my last reaction is to despair. So I think, that it brought to mind also that 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 opposition between the dissociated response. And I'll just read a little bit about what the dissociated response was. So the lawyer said, "First, I have sympathy, distress, and concern for the victims of a massive tragedy. The immediate need is for medical attention, the mobilisation of supplies and personnel in the area. Second, Union Carbide, other chemical companies and government agencies in this country and elsewhere need to review relevant safety standards and procedures, both corporate and governmental. Third, I want the established mechanisms of our adjudicatory system to be available and effective. Fourth, I'm concerned about the continued economic viability of Union Carbide." So you can see the difference. Essentially, it's the first one is about the heart, it's about the emotions, it's about feeling. And to me, certainly when I read that, I can feel it. It's so much more authentic and real and organic and natural. So I leave it there. Thank you for listening.